While I was recovering, he was with her at the beach. I had just gotten out of the hospital after what felt like the longest stretch of my life. I was barely holding it together, physically and emotionally drained, but I was trying to survive. I had this image of my partner, the person I loved, being my rock. While I was laid up, barely able to move, he was out there, living a life without me. It wasn't until later, when I stumbled across a photo on his phone, that I realized the extent of what had been going on. There he was, at the beach. With her, a woman I didn't know, someone I hadn't even heard about. I couldn't breathe. That moment it was like everything I thought I knew about our life together fell apart in one click. I felt every inch of that betrayal. It wasn't just the fact that he was with her. It was that he had abandoned me, the one time I needed him the most, and this is how he spent it. I think I went into a kind of shock right away. I was staring at that picture, but it wasn't making sense. It couldn't be real. I kept replaying every moment we had spent together, every I love you, every promise that we're in this together. It felt like I was seeing our whole relationship through a different lens. How did I miss the signs? How could I have been so blind? But there it was in front of me. He was at the beach, holding hands with someone else. I could feel the anger rising, but also this deep, deep hurt that made me feel sick. Was it my fault? Was I not enough? The thoughts spun in my head. I felt numb. There was this overwhelming sense of disbelief, and underneath that, a hurt so sharp it felt like a knife, twisting in my chest. I wanted to scream, cry, disappear, anything to escape the truth that was staring me in the face. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop thinking about it, but the more I thought, the worse it got. It wasn't just that he had been with her, it was the fact that he had been there while I was suffering. He knew how much I needed him, and instead of being there, he was somewhere else, building memories I would never get to be a part of. Did I mean so little to him? That thought kept echoing in my mind. I couldn't escape it. Every second that passed felt like another blow to the gut. The shock wore off, and it was replaced by something far more painful. I started questioning everything. Was I ever really loved? Was I just someone to pass the time with? And what about all those times he said he'd never leave? It all felt like a lie. How could someone I trusted so deeply hurt me like this? I could barely breathe, let alone think straight. My mind was spiraling, and I didn't know how to make sense of what had happened. The worst part. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront him right away, to yell at him, to demand answers. But another part of me was terrified. What if his answers were worse than what I already knew? What if I couldn't handle the truth? I felt broken and small, like I wasn't enough for him, and maybe I never was. But could I even handle the pain of hearing him admit it? I wanted to escape, to pretend it wasn't real. Maybe if I stayed silent, I could somehow protect myself from the truth that was waiting to tear me apart. But then again, silence felt like I was letting him win. I didn't want to be that person. The hurt was too much, but the fear of facing it head-on was equally terrifying. What if he didn't even care about my pain? What if I was just a distant memory to him? Could I even look him in the eyes again after what he'd done? I didn't know what to do, but it felt like something had to give. This couldn't be the end of it. Not like this. It wasn't something I was looking for. Honestly, I didn't go digging for it. But there I was, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the pain. It wasn't even a conscious decision to check his social media, but somehow, I ended up there. I don't know why I checked, maybe because there was something gnawing at me, a feeling that I couldn't shake. That's when I saw it, a picture, posted on a public account. There he was, smiling, laughing, with her. They were so close, their hands intertwined. The sunset behind them was beautiful, and everything about that moment felt like it was stolen from me. I had been lying in bed, struggling to heal, while he was out there, enjoying himself with someone else. My stomach dropped to the floor. How could I have missed this? How could he do this to me, while I was trying to heal from the deepest pain of my life? My first thought was, this isn't real. But it was. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The evidence was right in front of me. There it was, hanging in the air, undeniable and raw. I sat there, frozen. My heart was beating way too fast. It felt like it was suffocating me. I wish I could say I handled it better, but I didn't. I went into shock, and it was like the world just froze. My thoughts were everywhere, crashing against each other like waves in a storm. How long had this been going on? Why didn't he tell me? What was wrong with me that he felt the need to hide this? There was so much anger in Mirage, but it wasn't just anger, it was hurt. A deep, aching hurt that made everything feel blurry. I wanted to reach out to him, to call him, to scream at him. But I didn't. I couldn't. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. And I was just free-falling into some unknown space. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. Any more betrayed, broken, worthless. All of it. Everything at once. And in the silence of my room, with just my thoughts for company, that loneliness settled in, too. It hit me harder than anything else. The isolation of it. While I was struggling, fighting to get better, he was out there, living his life. His life without me. I felt abandoned. It felt like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. Like all the promises we'd made meant nothing. It was overwhelming. I wanted to make it stop, to somehow erase that moment, but it stayed with me, haunting me, torturing me, making me question everything. We had a good relationship. At least, that's how it felt at the time. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We laughed a lot, shared secrets. There were late-night talks about the future, and those moments where we held each other tight, and everything just felt right. We had built something, or at least I thought we had. It felt like we understood each other in ways no one else could. I remember thinking that no matter what happened, we'd always be there for each other. I never expected anything like this. Sure, we'd had our arguments, and sometimes we didn't see eye to eye, but we always worked through it. I trusted him. I thought he trusted me. I never questioned it. We were a team. Or so I thought. There was something deep between us. We both had our vulnerabilities, things we didn't always share with anyone else, but we had each other. I thought that was the most important thing. We both needed love, connection, and understanding, and we gave that to each other. I don't think I realized how much I was relying on him, though, how much I believed that no matter what, he would always be there. We had this quiet kind of bond, one that didn't need to be constantly spoken about. It was there, in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. It was there in the little gestures, making coffee for me in the morning or holding me when I had a bad day. It was a kind of love that didn't need a lot of words, and I thought that was enough. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the cracks. The love I thought was unshakable, I now realize was fragile. There were small signs. At first, they seemed like nothing. Late nights out that turned into "I'm busy" texts. The occasional phone call that would go unanswered. He'd start getting quieter, more distant. And I'd notice the way his eyes would drift when we were together. Something wasn't right, but I didn't want to face it. I kept telling myself, it's nothing. He's just stressed. And I ignored my gut, because I didn't want to believe that something could be wrong. There were whispers in the back of my mind, but I shoved them down. I thought that if I just held on long enough, things would get better. I convinced myself that everything would work itself out. But that's what I do, I ignore. I always have. And by the time I realized something was really wrong, it was too late. There were things we never said. I didn't want to ask him directly what was going on, afraid of what I might find. He didn't tell me either. He let it hang there, this silent tension between us, and we both pretended it wasn't happening. I think we were both scared. I didn't want to push too hard and risk driving him away, and he didn't want to hurt me with the truth. So we both kept quiet. But silence doesn't fix anything. It just builds walls. I never told him I was scared that maybe this wasn't working anymore. Scared that we were growing apart. And he never told me he was checking out emotionally or physically. The silence became deafening, and we were both too afraid to face it. As time went on, I started noticing things. Small things at first, almost like I was imagining them. But once they started, they didn't stop. I felt like I was constantly on edge, always waiting for something to go wrong. He would cancel plans last minute or get distracted in the middle of a conversation, like I wasn't even there. The worst part was the quiet. He wasn't the same person I knew. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. He wasn't as present when we were together, and it was like he was constantly looking for a way out. I remember thinking to myself, maybe I'm just overthinking this. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. There was a feeling in the pit of my stomach that wouldn't go away. I could feel it, this slow shift, this emotional pullback, but I ignored it. I didn't want to acknowledge it, because if I did, it would mean facing the possibility that maybe he wasn't the person I thought he was. But I couldn't stop wondering, what was he doing when he wasn't with me? Where was he? Why did it feel like he was slipping away? It didn't happen all at once. It was a gradual thing, a distance that grew over time, like two people slowly drifting apart on a river, neither one of them realizing it until they're miles apart. There were the late nights at work, and the unexplained absences. The first time he told me he had to work on a weekend, and then, on a whim, I checked his phone, nothing. No work emails, no late-night meetings. It wasn't like him to lie, or so I thought. Maybe he wasn't lying, but the lies began to pile up. The small things started to add up, and I began to feel like I was constantly chasing him. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being left behind grew stronger. I remember one night, just sitting there, watching him scroll through his phone. He wasn't talking to me. He wasn't looking at me. And I wondered if I was just some afterthought in his life. Why didn't he want to be with me like he used to? Why was I suddenly an inconvenience? The more I asked myself those questions, the more the cracks became impossible to ignore. Something was wrong, and I knew, deep down, that it was just a matter of time before everything fell apart. The more I started to piece things together, the more my trust in him started to unravel. It wasn't just the late nights or the sneaky behavior, it was the way I felt when we were together. There was this emotional distance I couldn't ignore anymore. I felt like I was talking to a stranger in my own home. And the worst part, I didn't know how to fix it. I tried to get him to open up, but the more I asked, the more closed off he became. And slowly, I started to doubt everything he said. Was he telling me the truth? Had he really been working late, or was he with her? The doubts crept in, and they didn't leave. I didn't know how to trust him anymore. How could I? Every time I thought about the relationship, it felt like I was standing on shaky ground, just waiting for it all to fall apart. I tried to believe him, tried to ignore my gut telling me something was wrong, but I couldn't. It hurt too much. The trust I had in him was slipping away, and I didn't know how to hold on. It was a lie, but I didn't know how to prove it. He kept telling me that nothing was wrong, that I was just being paranoid. But as I dug deeper, I found more and more things that didn't add up. It wasn't just the late nights. It was the little things like when I'd call and he wouldn't answer, only to find out later that he had been out with her. Or when he'd say he was going somewhere with friends, but the story never really made sense. The more I pushed for the truth, the more I felt like I was being He'd look me in the eye and tell me everything was fine, but I knew it wasn't. I knew the truth. It wasn't just the lies, it was the way they made me feel. It was like I was being played, like I was the one who was crazy for questioning him. I could feel myself slipping, but I didn't know how to stop it. The lies were wearing me down, and I couldn't fight them anymore. I wasn't sure if I was losing him, or if I was losing myself in this mess. It wasn't just the lies, it was the way he made me feel about myself. Every time I brought up the suspicion that something was wrong, he would twist it. He would make me feel like I was the problem. Like I was crazy for even thinking he was capable of betraying me. He'd turn it around and say, "You're just paranoid, or you're overreacting." And each time he said it, I started to doubt myself. I couldn't tell if I was imagining the distance between us or if it was really there. I wanted to trust him, I wanted to believe that he wouldn't do this to me, but the more he denied it, the more my own feelings became tangled. I began to question my instincts. Was I really overreacting? Had I just been looking for something to be wrong? Or was this manipulation? He made me feel like I was losing control of my own reality. I didn't know what was true anymore. The gaslighting was subtle, but it worked. I didn't know how to trust myself or him anymore. The gap between us was getting wider every day. It was like we were speaking different languages. He would go through the motions, but I could tell he wasn't really there. The intimacy we once shared was replaced by awkward silences and half-hearted gestures. There were times when I could see the distance in his eyes, and it broke me a little more, each time. The worst part was that I didn't know how to fix it. The love I thought we had was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know what to do. The moments we once shared felt forced, like we were both pretending that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't, and I started to wonder if it had ever been. He was emotionally shutting me out, and I couldn't make him open up. The more I tried to reach him, the further he pulled away. I was standing there, watching everything I loved slip away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. It had to happen. The confrontation. I couldn't keep living in this lie. I needed to know, and I needed him to face it. So, I asked. I didn't even care anymore. I just had to know if what I suspected was true. I asked him about the beach, about her, and I didn't care about how he would react, how he might defend himself. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. He looked at me, and for a moment, it felt like time froze. He didn't answer at first, and that silence told me everything. His eyes shifted away, and I knew he had been caught. It wasn't just the beach, it was everything. The lies, the distance, the manipulation. It was all true. I felt my heart drop into my stomach as he tried to say something, anything, but his words felt empty. I couldn't hear him. I couldn't focus on anything except the fact that everything I feared had come true. The betrayal was real, and I didn't know how to process it. The truth spilled out in a rush. There was no denying it. He admitted it. He had been with her at the beach, and it wasn't just a one-time thing. It had been going on for a while, and the worst part, he didn't even seem sorry. There was no regret in his eyes, no guilt in his voice. It felt like he was apologizing just to get it over with, but it didn't matter. Nothing he said could take back what he did. My heart shattered right then and there. I had given him everything, and in return, he had chosen someone else. He didn't even fight for me, didn't even care enough to try to make it right. I wanted to scream, I wanted to lash out, but I couldn't. It felt like I was watching someone else's life, not my own. How could I ever trust him again after this? Everything I thought I knew about trust, about love, was now in pieces at my feet. I couldn't pick it up. I didn't know how. Every word he said felt like a lie. Every action seemed like a betrayal. I couldn't trust him anymore. I couldn't even trust myself to make sense of what had happened. How could I have been so blind? How did I miss all the signs? I had trusted him with everything, and he had turned that trust into something unrecognizable. There was nothing left. He had taken everything, and now I was left with nothing but the wreckage of what we had. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't even know if I could. I was drowning in emotions, anger, sadness, regret, betrayal. It was a storm inside of me that I couldn't control. I wanted to scream at him, to make him feel the hurt I was feeling, but I also wanted to curl up and disappear. What had happened to us? What had happened to me? The guilt ate at me too. Maybe I ignored the signs. Maybe I stayed too long. Maybe I was too trusting. I didn't know. I couldn't understand why it had to end this way. Why couldn't he have been honest with me? Why couldn't we have worked through this together? But that wasn't the reality. The reality was that he had chosen her. He had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and there was no coming back from that. I didn't know how to process the chaos inside me. I didn't know how to let it go. I couldn't escape the regret. It was like it was seeping into every corner of my mind. How could I have been so blind? I kept asking myself that, over and over. I kept thinking about all the moments that now felt like lies. The times he'd said he was just busy when I needed him most. The moments when I felt like something wasn't right but ignored it, because I didn't want to face the truth. It hurt so much. Not just because of what he did, but because of how little I meant in those moments. The man I thought I knew had never been real. I couldn't even look back on the good times without feeling like they had been tainted by this. Was he ever truly there, or was I just a placeholder until something better came along? Every single part of what we had now felt like a mistake. The more I thought about it, the deeper the regret sank into me, and the heartbreak. It was unbearable. It wasn't just about losing him. It was about losing the version of me I had been with him. I didn't know who I was without him anymore. I didn't know how to heal from this, how to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. It wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was what it did to me, what it made me question about myself. I started thinking about my ability to trust, about my choices, about the things I had ignored or overlooked. I realized that I had let him take so much from me, and in doing that, I had given up a piece of who I was. I had allowed someone else to dictate how I felt about myself. It made me feel weak, vulnerable. I hadn't been listening to myself, to my own instincts, and now it felt like I had nothing left to lean on. I questioned my own judgment. How had I not seen it? How could I have been so consumed with my love for him that I ignored my own needs and my own voice? I didn't just feel betrayed by him, I felt betrayed by myself. The damage went deeper than I had ever expected. I wasn't just heartbroken over him. I was mourning the loss of myself. The worst part was realizing how much I'd compromised. In this relationship, I had sacrificed parts of me for him, and for what? So he could betray me when I needed him most. And yet, here I was, feeling lost and unsure of who I even was anymore. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to begin picking up the pieces of myself after everything had shattered. Every time I thought I had processed one emotion, another one would crash in, overwhelming me. There were days when I couldn't stop crying, days when I would wake up in the morning and feel like I was just going through the motions. My body was tired, my mind was exhausted, but it wasn't just that, it was the emotional toll. Every little thing would remind me of him. And it wasn't just the memories of the good times, it was the realization that everything I had believed in was a lie. I was haunted by it. I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it, but there were no words left to say. There were times I just wanted to shut the world out, curl up in my bed, and pretend it all never happened. But I couldn't. The pain was too real, too raw to ignore. There was no escaping it. And in the quiet moments when I'd reflect, I realized that I had a long road ahead of me. There was no quick fix for this kind of heartbreak. The reality of the situation set in when I realized I couldn't just walk away from this without facing it. The consequences weren't just emotional, they were tangible. There were people involved, there were memories, there were years of my life that I would never get back. And now I was left to face all of it alone. I had to confront the fallout, his absence, the emotional wreckage, the broken trust. I had to take responsibility for allowing myself to be in this situation, for ignoring the red flags, for not protecting myself sooner. But at the same time, I was left with this intense feeling of betrayal that made everything feel heavier. It wasn't just about losing him, it was about losing the person I had been in that relationship. I had changed. I was no longer the same person I had been before I found out what he did. My identity had shifted, and I had to figure out who I was now. The consequences were bigger than I had imagined. This wasn't just an end to a relationship, it was the beginning of something new, something I wasn't prepared for. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to face it. The hardest part was trying to rebuild. I had no idea where to start, what to fix first, or if I was even capable of healing. I wanted to erase everything. I wanted to forget about him, about the pain, about the betrayal. But I knew I couldn't do that. I had to face the truth, even if it was painful. So I started small. I cut contact with him. I deleted his number. I deleted every trace of him from my life. But that wasn't the hard part. The hardest part was learning to trust again, learning to trust myself. I had spent so long relying on him to be my rock, and now I was left without it. I had to figure out how to be that for myself. There were days when I felt like I wasn't strong enough to do it. But I kept pushing forward. I started taking care of myself, physically and emotionally. I spent time with people who lifted me up, people who reminded me of my worth. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like a battle. But slowly, I started to rebuild my life. It wasn't the life I expected, but it was mine. And in that small act of reclaiming my space, I began to heal. Acceptance didn't come easily. I wanted to hold on to the anger, to the pain, because letting go felt like I was letting him win. But I realized that holding on was only hurting me. The anger, the betrayal, it was all consuming me, keeping me stuck in the past. I had to learn to forgive, not for him, but for me. I had to let go of the story I had built in my head about us. Because that story was never real. The truth was that we had grown apart long before I realized it. The truth was that he wasn't the person I thought he was. And the hardest part of letting go was realizing that the love I had for him was gone. It wasn't that I stopped loving him, it's that I had to love myself more. I had to forgive myself for staying too long, for not protecting my heart, for not seeing the signs. Letting go wasn't easy. But it was the only way I could move forward. It was the only way I could heal. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to rebuild my life without him in it. Looking back on it all, I can't deny the lessons I learned. The most important one, I can't rely on anyone else to define my worth. I had given so much of myself to him, to us, that I forgot who I was outside of that relationship. I forgot what it felt like to be strong on my own. I thought that love meant giving everything. But now I see that it also means holding on to yourself. It means knowing your worth, regardless of what someone else does or doesn't do. I've learned to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, and to prioritize my own emotional health. I'm not the same person I was before all of this. I'm stronger now. I know that I don't need anyone else to complete me. I've learned to complete myself. And that's something I'll never forget. Pain has a way of teaching you things you never expect to learn. I used to think that love was about being selfless, about giving everything to the person you care about. But now I know that it's also about protecting yourself. It's about finding balance. I've learned to value myself more than I ever did before. And I've learned that it's okay to walk away from something that's no longer serving you, even if it's hard. I've learned that my worth isn't tied to anyone else's actions, and that I am more than enough on my own. This experience has made me stronger, but it's also made me more cautious. I won't let someone else's betrayal define me. Instead, I've taken that pain and turned it into strength. I've learned to trust myself again. And I've learned that healing isn't linear. It's messy, it's painful, but it's worth it. And I'm stronger now because of it. I guess the lesson here is this: betrayal hurts, it cuts deep, but it doesn't have to destroy you. You don't have to let someone else's choices define who you are or how you feel about yourself. Trust is fragile, but so is love, and sometimes, you have to let go of what you thought was real to make room for what truly is. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but healing is possible. And in that healing, you find yourself again, maybe stronger, maybe wiser, but definitely more aware of what you deserve. I've learned that love is not about sacrificing yourself for someone else. It's about standing up for yourself, about knowing when to walk away, and about understanding that you can survive without anyone else, but with yourself. I'm sharing this because I know I'm not the only one who's been hurt like this. I know there are others out there who are struggling with betrayal, with heartbreak, and with the aftermath of someone else's choices. So I want to ask you, what would you do? What would you do if you were in my shoes? How would you heal from something like this? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your own story with me. Let's talk about betrayal, love, and healing. We're all in this together, and if you're not already subscribed, please consider joining me for more stories like this. You're not alone in your journey, and we're stronger when we share it. I know many of you have experienced your own struggles with betrayal, loss, and heartbreak. If you've found any strength through your own journey, or learned lessons that helped you heal, I want to hear your thoughts. Share your stories in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to subscribe for more real stories, raw truth, and emotional journeys. Thanks for listening to mine. I'm here with you.